Lecture, Introduction to Pacifism, Section 1. Good morning, everyone. Today we begin with pacifism, a concept that has shaped religious thought, social movements, and global politics. At its heart, pacifism is about seeking peace and rejecting violence as a legitimate means of resolving disputes. But as we'll see, pacifism is not one single, uniform idea. It is a spectrum of positions, a tradition with deep historical roots and modern relevance. Defining pacifism. The simplest way to understand pacifism is this. It is the belief that violence, war, and killing are wrong, and that conflicts should be resolved through nonviolent means, through dialogue, negotiation, and peaceful resistance. This definition is broad, and it's important to recognize that pacifism isn't confined to wars between nations. The principles of pacifism can apply to personal relationships, to community disputes, to international politics, and even to how we treat the natural world. In every case, the pacifist insists that there is another way, that destruction and harm are not inevitable, nor are they justifiable. The word itself comes from the Latin root for peacemaking. In fact, when the term pacifism first emerged at the turn of the 20th century, it was used in contrast to the glorification of war. At that time, war was often seen as noble and heroic, a natural extension of state power. A pacifist, therefore, was someone who said, no, war is not noble. It is intrinsically destructive. It is not the solution to our problems. It is the problem itself. Historical shifts in pacifism. After World War I, pacifism evolved in meaning and expression. It became linked with non-resistance, as we see in traditions like the Quakers or in the writings of Leo Tolstoy. This form of pacifism emphasizes an almost absolute refusal to participate in violence, even when confronted with persecution. Over time, it was also connected with nonviolence, as practiced and taught by Mahatma Gandhi in India, Martin Luther King Jr. in the United States, and Cesar Chavez in the labor rights movement. These figures demonstrated that pacifism is not about passivity. It is about active, courageous resistance without the use of violence. Their work illustrates a profound truth. Nonviolent movements can reshape entire societies and political orders, showing the power of moral integrity and peaceful protest over aggression. Forms of pacifism. It's important to note that pacifism is not monolithic. There are multiple ways of being a pacifist. Absolute pacifism, the rejection of all violence under any circumstances, including self-defense. For absolute pacifists, any act of violence is a violation of moral principle. Conditional or contingent pacifism, the position that while violence is usually wrong, it may be justified in exceptional cases, such as self-defense or to prevent an even greater evil. This distinction highlights the diversity within pacifist thought. Some see pacifism as a strict moral principle, others as a practical guideline that must be weighed against complex realities. Contemporary pacifism. Today, pacifism is not only about wars and militaries. It influences social justice movements, human rights activism, and environmental campaigns. Many groups use nonviolent direct action, protests, boycotts, civil disobedience, and blockades, not only to oppose violence, but to transform social systems. Pacifist approaches also seek to undermine the legitimacy of violent actors. By refusing to respond with violence, they challenge aggressors to rethink their strategies and, ideally, push them toward dialogue and negotiation. Pacifism also brings something unique to the field of conflict resolution. Unlike traditional diplomatic or institutional methods, pacifist approaches often emerge from civil society, grassroots movements, religious communities, and activist networks. These movements act outside the usual structures of state power, bringing a fresh and sometimes disruptive force for peace. The core standard of pacifism. So, what really defines pacifism? It can be summed up in this principle. Before interpersonal, intercommunity, or interstate antagonisms, adopt nonviolent social behavior. In other words, pacifism calls us to commit to peace before violence ever begins, to prevent the spiral of destruction that war inevitably brings. From a moral perspective, this position often appears more coherent, more humane, and more justifiable than the so-called necessity of violence. However, and this is important, pacifism is always countercultural. The dominant worldview in most societies has treated war as natural, even as a reflection of human survival instincts. Violence, many argue, is simply part of the essence of things. Pacifism directly challenges this assumption. It insists that war is not inevitable and that it should always be subjected to moral critique. Closing. So, in this first section, we've established that pacifism is not passive, naive, or simplistic. It is a broad and diverse tradition that challenges the glorification of war, insists on the possibility of nonviolent alternatives, and seeks justice through peace. As we move forward, we'll see how different religious traditions have engaged with pacifism, how historical movements have embodied it, and how figures like Gandhi, Tolstoy, and Martin Luther King Jr. have developed it into one of the most transformative forces of the modern era.